Hey everybody, how's it going? Michael Mosley here, aka Mod, and I am joined here today by Josiah Goodin and Isaac Goodin, two brothers who are working on a game called Vulpine, which is out now on Kickstarter. So once we're done with this broadcast, you guys can catch the links and pledge to the podcast, pledge to their Kickstarter campaign for this interesting looking game.
Hi.
Hello.
All right, so guys, first things first, what exactly is Vulpine?
You want to do that?
No.
All right. So Vulpine is an action exploration game where you survive as ridiculously well-armed animals. So you can explore a beautiful low-poly world, but you can also be a fox with a sword in its mouth. And throughout that world, you find things, you scavenge for resources to craft things, but you also fight gigantic, monstrous bosses that take skill and observational skills in general to like read the bosses and fight them. And you progress throughout the world by getting boss loot and upgrading your equipment.
Okay. There's a lot of survival games out there. We just got No Man's Skies, which has survival elements in it, but Vulpine is working on a big map. So, what games inspired Vulpine?
Well, let's see. I mean, I think our greatest influence is Tokyo Jungle, a game put out by Sony Online Entertainment. It's a game where you play as animals in the post-apocalypse. And we thought, well, what if we took a survival genre game, but made it with animals and swords? And I think that's how this game started out. You want to talk about Terrarium real quick?
Sure. Monster Hunter.
Oh, yeah, Monster Hunter.
So another one of the games that inspired us a lot is we enjoy Monster Hunter because I don't know if you ever played it, but it's a game where you fight bosses, and that's pretty much what you do. You hunt large monsters, but it's very tactical. It's very tactical. You have to learn your move set, and you have to be precise and learn how to read the monsters and their movements to fight them. And it's a really great game to play as a group of people, and we kind of wondered, why isn't that kind of style of combat on PC or anything else other than the 3DS? And so we took that really as a lot of inspiration for how we want our boss battles to work. We want it to be like very tactical and meaningful, when you fight bosses.
Is there a main single player campaign, or will it just be completely online multiplayer?
There won't be a campaign necessarily. There will be a short narrative that we have that kind of introduces you to all the mechanics in the open. But it's mostly just to guide you into the game, and then you play in the open world and hunt monsters, fight bosses.
A single player can play through the entire game by themselves, but it's mostly recommended for multiplayer.
Yeah.
There are other animals other than the fox and the bear and the rabbit. Earlier, you guys introduced the rhino. Will we see any more new additional animals brought out either pre or post release?
So let's see. So right now, I think we originally started the Kickstarter with the rabbit, fox, fennec fox, and the bear. And through our community goals, we unlocked the rhino. But also, I think recently we unlocked the wolf. So we'll be adding a wolf to the game in the beta release. But there's also chances we'll probably add a few more animals as we go along, maybe as another community goal or later during testing. But there also is a tier right now that if you back, you can actually choose an animal to put in the game, and we'll work with you to help design it and get in the game.
And I can confirm that there will be one more small animal announced at some point.
Okay. So you have 3 different classes. There's the small, medium, and big animals. but will each animal carry a specific special ability that other animals won't have?
It's a hard one to answer.
So, in terms of stats, those different classes will have different stats. So, bears will have more HP, be slower, have more stamina, kind of thing. But we're debating adding additional abilities per animal, but we haven't really decided if we want to do that necessarily. And partially is we thought of the rhino, and we thought we got to have a charge with the rhino. So that's one thing we're considering, and probably we'll work with the community through the beta testing to see what works best there.
All right. The game has this polygon art style. I guess is what we'll go with. What was the decision going with the route of going polygon with not only the characters but the world in general?
So I'm just a huge fan of the flat shaded low poly look in general. I've loved it for a long time, but that's only part of the decision. The other part is, since it doesn't require a lot of texture work at all, I can actually put out enough of the art assets so that we can actually make a game with 2 people that's this large. So that allows us to actually make progress instead of taking years to develop.
Yeah. So like that content and work back and forth, considering he's doing all the art.
Yeah.
So as an artist, was there any game or any artist in general that inspired you to go with this look, or was it just something, like you said you were a fan of it? Was it just something you've always wanted to do, or was it something like inspired you, like you saw a game, was like, oh, I can do that, and you wanted to do it on an open world scale?
Well, I mean, I've always been in low poly communities as a lurker mostly. So that's where I became infatuated with that look. And I'd say the only artist that made me want to go with low poly would have to be Ian McConville, who's currently working on Slime Rancher. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
So what game engine are you guys using, or what engine in general are you guys using to create Vulpine?
Unity 3D.
Yeah, so what are the challenges with using Unity 3D with an open world game such as Vulpine?
So there's some challenges. I don't think they're necessarily restricted to the engine. It's more of when you're rendering or have a large world that a player's going through, there has to be a lot of work in making sure you don't load up all of the terrain that they can't see and everything. So there's a lot of optimization work that happens. And that's actually one of the bigger issues with going to a larger scale world, is managing when to render trees, what to render, along with checking for collisions on the server side with all the different players on the server and doing it efficiently. And that goes from networking as well.
The game is being built with only 3 people, an artist, the programmer, and musician. What are some of the challenges your team faces with such a small group working on this open world game?
Yeah. Well, part of the challenge is, like, when you're trying to work on things together, I might be programming in something for a month or 2, depending on what it is. Or so I might be adding a feature set, but he might be working on separate art. And so one of the challenges is trying to do the project management to make sure that he's doing the art that I'll need when I need it so I can do my work. And then when he needs my help, I can hop in and do his stuff. So it's just kind of synchronizing what's working between us. And as far as music goes, our musician's pretty awesome. We can just ask him for music and give him some stuff, and he works on it.
We give him a vague idea, and he comes back with something beautiful, and we're like, "Oh, yeah. Okay, thanks." And he says it's a sketch. He's like, "Here's a sketch."
Yeah, it's not done yet.
Oh yeah.
Well, since you guys brought up I brought him up, but since you guys mentioned how much you liked working with them, you're working with aviators. which
Yes.
which is pretty awesome. I know of Aviators. I have some of his music, so I found out he was working on the game. It's like, oh, that's pretty cool. How did he get involved with the project?
So we have a friend that's like in that community, and turns out he's friends with Aviators. And I think like 3 years ago, he wanted to get into game music, and he's just like, I need to ask somebody who's in games right now what to do. And so he messaged me, and we talked back and forth, and eventually we started playing Battlefield together and other games, and now it's Overwatch. But eventually it was like, hey, I'm about to actually go for a longer my first commercial game. And I was like, do you want to do the music for it? And he's like, yes, I'll do the music. And it's been pretty fun working with him.
Okay. So music-wise, will the game have a soundtrack that the players will be able to get their hands on?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So there's going to be the digital OST you can get on Kickstarter right now on the $30 tier and above. He's planning 10 to 13 tracks. And it'll be available on Steam as well when it's released, and on his Bandcamp, I believe.
So going back to the game itself, how many types of weapons will there be?
So right now, we have categories of weapons, so spear, sword, and hammer. And they each play a little bit differently. They share the same moves between weapons in that category, but yeah, in general, it's just sword is a quicker, more agile kind of weapon. Spear has a longer reach. Hammer is slower but deals more damage. But each of those categories has dozens of weapons. We haven't really decided. The way the weapon upgrading kind of works is you start with the base weapon, and unlike pretty much every survival game, there's no durability, because we find weapon durability to be kind of an issue in those games, where you find yourself more often thinking about how do I get this next item to play the game further, rather than, hey, I have this thing and now I can go do the gameplay. So in that way, we're trying to differentiate ourselves from survival games. So for crafting a weapon, you would start with the base material, start crafting a weapon, and you can upgrade that. So there's like a weapon tree. And with using different resources, you can upgrade that weapon to a different style of weapon. So you can start with the toothpick-looking sword and get a stone sword, and then upgrade that to more specialized sword, and then eventually, like, throughout the tree, get to very legendary kind of weapons. So the idea being, you take your equipment, you keep that with you throughout the game, and you upgrade it.
Okay. Will weapons be restricted by animal class, by small, medium, and big?
No.
Okay, so I can have little bunny rabbit carol, like
The weapon scales to the size of the animal,
right?
which is kind of hilarious
It's
when you
kinda
say the
funny.
bear is a hammer.
So I can have a little rabbit run around with Thor's hammer, just
Yeah.
smacking my enemies. Okay. So actually, I'm gonna go back to the crafting system in a moment, but some of the smaller things. Will there be destructible environments? Because since you're crafting, I'm guessing you'll be breaking down stones and trees in no time.
So there'll be destruction in terms of breaking down stones, trees, and kind of mining ore. But in terms of like actually destroying terrain necessarily, we don't plan to add it. Mainly because it's an additional technical feature that I have to add, and I don't think it necessarily will influence the gameplay overall. I know a lot of people kind of like that stuff because they're like, oh, Minecraft or some of the other survival games have digging and stuff, but we don't, in general, don't think that it'll really add too much to the game.
Okay. So going back to upgrading, how will upgrades work with weapons? How you mentioned it earlier. So how exactly will that work out?
It's hard to answer.
So to upgrade the weapon, we're going to have like different refineries. So you have like an anvil, your ore refinery to get raw materials. But you would take those and you take your weapon to go to one of the refineries and take a raw material like an ore and upgrade your weapon to a different branch on the tree. But then that gives you the ability to look at the other possible weapons you can take that item or branch to. And as it goes on, instead of being the basic materials you find throughout the world, it becomes more and more, here's boss loots that you have to get, or different, more rare items to get to those special branches. So you might get to a point where there's 4 different options for you to upgrade. You could choose, and each one of those branches has more options down the line that don't overlap. And so at some point you'll be, oh, I need to kill 3 of these spiders, get some things. I'm going to make my spider weapon because that's awesome.
Will there be armor for the animals in here since they're carrying around weapons? Will there be a way to craft armor?
I'd say it's unlikely from an art standpoint, mostly because to put the armor over the animals is a technical hurdle that would take a little bit too much time for a single artist. I think we will have some sort of like accessory slot.
Yeah, there'll be.
That'll act as some form of armor, but that would be all.
So we touched on crafting, which leads to dens. What exactly are dens?
So I think the best way to describe a den is it's kind of like your external storage area that you can go to at any point in time. It's a customizable vault, basically, where you can go put in items to take with you to other servers. So one of the things we want to do is make it so that people can go to a different server with their friend and not necessarily lose all their equipment, because we consider equipment to be an important thing. But we also wanted to have like a nice little customizable area that they can always go to as their starting point if they join a new server. And so it'll exist mainly as a way to store those weapons and get them cross-server. But we're going to restrict it to only either player-bound items or only rare items to basically make it so that nobody goes to a server with a bunch of commodity items and kind of ruins the economy there.
Okay. Speaking of economies, would there be a trading system that players can implement with their friends?
Will there be like an official like dialogue for that, or would it just
Probably.
Really?
I think so. Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, you could trade items in a lot of these games, but the difference between some people is dropping it on the ground and picking it up as a trade, or giving somebody a dialogue so that they can like barter a little bit. And I know, I think I could add a dialogue.
Yeah,
I like that better because nobody can come in and take your items.
Because right now you can drop items on the ground and swap them that way, but we might want an actual dialogue for that.
Yeah.
So players can join their friends in the open world. Just how many players can group up at once?
So the server size right now is going to be we're aiming for 32 players. And if we get above that, great. But it'll be 32 player servers. So theoretically you could have 32 people group up together and do kind of a boss rush or raid or something.
Okay. Yeah, that was my next question. Raid dungeons. Will raid dungeon events be a thing, or will they be more like up to the player to group up with friends and do their own kind of raids?
It's kind of both. So we plan on like you explore, try to find all these animals that are throughout the environment, and that's kind of one of the mechanics. We want people to kind of talk to each other and interact and try to figure out where different things are. But the other thing is we also want kind of like an instance dungeon area for big raids. So we'll probably have like visible portals or something you could go into. We haven't really figured out how we want to present that throughout the world, but it'll be a kind of an instance thing that you group up with other people to do.
Okay. So will there be a system set up for friends akin to something like clans that they can set up?
Yeah. I haven't really thought about too much how that'll work, if that'll be you set up a clan only on a server or you do it kind of throughout the entirety of the game, but there'll be a system to group up with your friends and invite people to join your group.
I feel like the only reason we don't have like a guild system right now is because we couldn't think of a good enough pun.
Yeah.
Like we call it a party system, the pack system, but we don't know what to call a guild yet.
There's got to be some.
Herd system.
Yeah, herd.
So while we're on the topics of groups, seeing how you guys are still trying to figure these things out, do you have an idea or a plan to do something like a group den, to where you guys can like make a clan or little flags and create a group den where everybody can contribute to it?
That'll probably be something we add. That'll come after dens, because I'm pretty sure I can reuse a lot of the code and assets to make a group den. But yeah, definitely, I think that'd be something people would enjoy. It's like a nice place for all of them to chill.
So going on raids, you brought up monsters that multiple players can take on together. Exactly what kind of monsters can players expect? Because in your Kickstarter video, there was this dragon in the background. So far we've seen a dragon and a giant stone spider. What other monsters can we expect? Can we see in possible raids?
I don't think we're quite ready to talk about the other bosses. The spider is mostly complete, but we're holding off on the dragon. The dragon will be a harder boss to take down.
Yeah. So the thing with the bosses is, since we're still like working on them, is like we're still developing the AI necessarily. So it's one of those things we want the boss fights to be really fun, engaging, and valuable to the player. So we're putting a lot of time into tweaking the AI to feel great. And so we're kind of working on the spider dragon and a few others right now before we decide on a full list of bosses. However, there is the highest tier of the campaign right now is you can help design a boss. So if somebody wants to pay that much money, they can help design a boss. And considering how we kind of want the game is kind of a weird, quirky fantasy thing in a way, we're pretty much open to a lot of different boss ideas. So.
How big is Vulpine's world? It's an open world, and the map that you guys showed had what looked like a tiny island off to the side, and a big chunk of the map shrouded in clouds. And there's mountains, deserts, and we saw some grasslands. So the world of Vulpine is pretty varied. So just how big is the world?
You had an actual measurement at one point, right?
Yeah. So how it's working right now is all these environments I'm generating procedurally, and then we kind of go in and touch them up by hand and work them, like make sure that they blend and blend together in the world and fit. The full size of the world isn't exactly determined yet, because I'm still trying to decide whether or not we should go fully procedural and just generate a huge world, no matter without us necessarily doing as much hand involvement, or if we should just do one that's done using procedural stuff to make it manual. But it's pretty big. When I was doing the generation, at some point in time, I accidentally generated a world about the size of Texas. So it probably won't be that big, because at some point it's the balance between open world and making sure you could find other people needs to be there. So we kind of work around that.
And there's always that challenge of, if the world's too big, then there's nothing interesting to do in the world, because it's got to be mostly open space. And we want people to want to explore the world rather than just settle down in a place.
The game is planned for release on PC and Mac in July 2017. Is there a chance we can see Vulpine released on other platforms?
So right now, there's a chance at some point, probably post initial release, I'm going to try to do a Linux build. But I didn't feel like promising that on the Kickstarter yet, because I haven't fully decided to do it. as in terms of consoles, we haven't maybe, but that it would be decently after the PC release. But so far, everything I've been doing, I made sure is compatible with porting to a console. But I feel like that's a whole different beast entirely, is porting to a console, that especially since I've only ever ported to the Wii U and haven't really done PS4 or Xbox One.
Okay.
So console, maybe. Linux, maybe.
So everything's a maybe right now. But it's good. It's good to know you guys are like trying to focus in on just getting the PC versions ready to go.
Yeah, that's our overall plan. Is we want to get it to a beta stage and work with people as much as possible, which is why we're doing a closed beta before early access. Because I want the group of people that are backing us, I want them to make sure they had a part in figuring out what the game should be, what should be refined more, how the combat should work more in detail. And so we're trying to go for a more open development. And we're hoping that once we go to early access, it won't actually be there too long necessarily. And that we can cover most of the stuff in closed beta and then go to early access and then add more stuff post full release.
Right. So the beta and the early access, what will be the two biggest difference between them?
So I think the closed beta is probably going to go through like multiple closed betas. Initially, it'll be like, hey, we're focusing on these things for the beta. So I want to make sure that everybody thinks this combat's great and make sure that it actually runs on their computer to start with. Because as a team of two people, it's hard to test all the different configurations that PCs could have or Macs could have.
Yeah, and someone might have an issue on Intel CPUs, and we wouldn't even know that.
So that's the initial closed beta will be like, oh, compatibility with all these different PCs, Macs, and then also refining the combat, because we feel like the combat is one of the most important things to us in the game. Is the combat should be great, fighting gigantic monsters should be great. And then the next phase for the closed beta will be, okay, now we're going to work on the open world and get everybody exploring that. So it will take little steps as we need.
Okay. So we talked about the game. Let's talk about the Kickstarter. You guys have a goal of 30,000. Where would you guys go with your the game of stretch goals? Like, what's your aim if you go past that?
So I think our first stretch goal right now is we're going to add more animals. Past that is we haven't necessarily revealed that whatsoever. We're kind of going to wait till we hit the first stretch goal, but I'll tell you anyway. Past that is if we get past that and go to 50K, it'll probably be I'll do a fully procedural world, because that's one of those things that I have a lot of experience doing procedural stuff, and I know that I can take a procedural world and make sure that no matter where you're in that world, there's at least 3 things that on the horizon that you're interested in visiting. And I could do that programmatically and make sure that there's always content for people to see and make it as awesome as possible, which actually gives us more chances to make different biomes. But past those 2, we haven't necessarily decided.
One of the pledges allows people to design a playable animal. It says that it's subject to approval. What are some of the restrictions that you guys have in place when it comes down to allowing somebody to create an animal?
Well, the main one is it has to be a quadruped, which means that it's on all 4s, 4 legs on the ground. And it can't be completely ridiculous as an animal.
No starfish.
So we cannot have starfish. As the one.
So I'm guessing having something like a unicorn would be a no-go if you guys.
Actually, I wouldn't mind. I would 100% go for you.
I don't mind the weird things as
I don't
much.
mind weird things.
It's the restrictions are more there because as quadrupeds, we can reuse a lot of the same animations and then tweak them to fit the animal, and that saves us a lot of time in creating the animal. So like necessarily 2,500 is actually fairly cheap for getting an animal with how many animations?
We're nearing 200 animations right now.
Because there has to be an animation for each combo at every attack for that animal, and so because we're allowed to reuse the animations for quadrupeds, it makes it a lot easier for us. And then on the programming side, I have everything driven through spreadsheets as much as possible. So getting things into the game and tweaking their stats is really easily done for us.
So to summarize, because the skeletons have to be near the same as the rig we have set up.
Although we have been getting people asking about water animals.
I'm not sure about water animals.
Maybe in a further off stretch goal, water animals or flying. We'll see.
So nobody's gonna get their alligator put into the game anytime soon.
We'll see.
Yeah. So the bosses are a lot bigger than the animals you're allowed to play as. So for the highest tier that allows you to build a boss, are they under the same restriction of it has to be all four legs? It can't be like this humongous Godzilla-esque creature?
No, actually. So because each boss is being specifically designed by hand, there aren't really many animations we can use. So it's actually much less restrictive. So
like as long as it is not an offensive thing, I'll take whatever design they want to throw at me.
Yeah. And I think the issue with the bosses is more just making sure that their attack patterns and everything is interesting to play against for that boss, and that we don't end up with like 7 dragons. But I don't think that'll be the case. If somebody gets the boss tier, I'm sure they'll choose something that is interesting.
Yeah, with that tier, I'd work with them to make sure that the design's right. It moves the way they kind of want it to. But past that, we would be tweaking its attack patterns and all that ourselves.
So they can choose pretty much any fantasy animal or something.
Yeah, it's anything that isn't copywritten.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing.
Okay. So designing items and monuments that's in the game. With the players, well, not the players, but with your backers on higher tiers, would they be allowed to change up monuments? Like maybe have, instead of like little pillars, maybe they want like an entire temple or something akin to that.
Funny that you would mention that, because I have like a file on my desktop of a shrine just in case.
Yeah, the higher backer tiers will probably get a customized shrine or whatever you want to call it, monument, statue,
place with cool things in it.
And we're not necessarily restrictive there. It's just kind of
out there.
See,
it takes me like no time to make a tiny little shrine area. So,
well, fellas, I want to thank you for stopping by, for taking your time out of the Kickstarter and from developing your game any further, for chatting with us today.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for having us.
No problem.
It was a pleasure to meet you guys. So, as you guys know, the Kickstarter is still going on right now. As of this interview, there's 32 days left.
Yeah,
and they're already and they're already over a quarter way there with over 200 backers. So actually, I will find a link here and send it to you guys, so you have no excuse of why you didn't know it existed.
Yeah. And I guess in general, if anybody has any questions, they can always message us on the Kickstarter, and we'll get back to them.
Yeah, we are always open to questions.
Oh, that reminds me. On the Kickstarter, you talked about how you didn't like when campaigns went silent. So
Yes.
you, and yeah, you made a pretty bold promise for a video, or at minimum text update about what's going on. So is there a certain timeline you guys are peeping those, like the second week of every month, or is it just something that'll happen at random?
It'll probably happen at certain intervals, but
It'll happen within 30 days of the last
Yes.
update.
I'll guarantee that. The way it works is kind of like, oh, we're going to write an update. Well, I kind of want something to show. It might take a few more days to get something to show to people. And so most of the time we'll try to have something ready to show. But like if I work on networking stuff for a month and I can't make a post that's relatively interesting to anyone about that. So it might just be like, I worked on these things, but I won't go into detail and you can do art or something.
It's sometimes it might be, hey, I made the weapons look shiny when you attack.
But it's one of those things like every Saturday we've done a screenshot Saturday for the past 6 or 7 months now, where we tweet something
every Saturday.
Yeah, pretty much. And so we plan on continuing that. It's just we also want blog posts so that, and we'll update it on Kickstarter as well, where people can see what we're actually working on, so they get a better sense of how the development's progressing, and talk about things a little more openly.
We want people to know what's going on.
I'm very big on open development, and that's one of the issues I have with a lot of people who don't put things on early access, is they don't necessarily always talk with their community to work things the way they should be. And so, yeah, monthly updates is the thing that I'm kind of actually looking forward to doing.
Okay. All right, fellas. Well, again, thank you for stopping by. Thank you for taking your time to chat it up with us. And for all of you at home, the link is up. And for those of you that will be viewing this on YouTube or at omnigamer.com, you will find a link in the description and in our articles. So we're gonna keep an eye on you guys, because we are definitely interested in where Vulpine goes, and we can't wait to see further updates, to see these new animals. I kind of want to see this rhino in action, to be honest.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
More animations first, but there.
Honestly, I'm just looking forward to playing as the fox. Anything with the fox in it, there's a good chance I'll play it.
Yeah.
All right, so guys, thanks for stopping by, and good luck with the campaign.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for having us.